Picture a room, a conference table, 8 people, maybe 12. Everyone arrived with something to prove, and the talking starts. The moment the door closes, one person is cutting off another. Someone else is already preparing their response. Voices compete. Volume climbs. The air tightens. In the corner of that room, there is one person who isn't doing any of that. They're not rehearsing what to say. They're just watching. Their expression is unreadable, calm, in a way that feels deliberate. The loudest people in the room start to feel something uncomfortable, performing for an audience. That isn't applauding. The quiet person hasn't said a word, and somehow they're the most powerful person in the room. This is not shyness. This is a strategy. Today, we're going to pull it apart. We live in a world that has decided talking is the same as thinking. That volume is confidence. That speed is intelligence. And so people talk compulsively, not because they have something to say, but because the silence feels dangerous. Every unnecessary word is a small transfer of power. When someone speaks out of anxiety, to fill space, they leak information. They reveal what they know, and more critically, what they don't. They expose their positions before the right moment. They negotiate against themselves before the other person has said a thing. Stop for a moment. Think about the last time you said too much just because you were nervous. Think about a negotiation, a job interview. The person who talks first about what they need almost always ends up with less. The person who listens, who sits with the discomfort of silence, that person is collecting data. Or watching you place your cards on the table while they hold theirs. Still, in a world of noise, silence is an anomaly, and anomalies command attention. The quiet person isn't passive. They are loading. Before we go into the 3 tactical steps, I want to stop and ask you something. Are you watching this because you want to be heard, or because you want to be understood? Those are not the same thing. And the difference between those 2 desires is where most people get stuck. If you've made it this far, I think you already know. Something is off about the way the world asks you to communicate. If the logic behind the silence resonates with you, stay for the final step. Most people who stumble on this kind of content miss it entirely. And if you find value in this perspective, we're here every week, not for the noise, for the calm. Now moving to the 3 tactical advantages. Step 1. Data acquisition. When you speak, you stop receiving. That's the physics of a conversation most people forget. The person who talks least intentionally accumulates an extraordinary amount of information. They learn what motivates the other person, what frightens them, where their ego is fragile, what they're proud of, and what they're avoiding. All of this is broadcast continuously by people who are too occupied with performing to notice what they're transmitting. Great negotiators and great leaders understand this. They ask one precise question and then do something almost no one is trained to do anymore. They wait with full presence, as if the answer is the most important thing in the room. And because of that stillness, the other person almost always gives more than they intended to. Silence is not an absence of information. It is a container for it. Step 2. The vacuum. Human beings have a deep, almost physiological aversion to silence in conversation. It triggers us. It feels like disapproval, like something is wrong. And the quiet person knows this. When you hold silence consciously, the other person will attempt to fill it. And what they fill it with is almost always revealing. They will explain themselves. justify, soften a position they just stated firmly, offer a concession they hadn't planned to. This is not manipulation. It is observation. You are simply declining to rescue them from a moment of discomfort. And that discomfort does the work you never had to do out loud. You've seen this in your own life. A conversation where you said nothing after a difficult statement was made, and the other person immediately began backtracking. Because you said nothing, the vacuum is not empty. It is full of pressure, and pressure moves things. Step 3. The hammer. There is a principle in acoustics. In a room of constant noise, even a moderate sound played in a moment of quiet feels dramatic. The same is true of words. When a quiet person finally speaks in a meeting, the room changes because they have trained everyone around them to expect that their words are deliberate, worth hearing. Compare that to someone who has filled the room with words for 20 minutes. By the time they say something important, it has already been diluted. No one knows which of their sentences to hold. The quiet person speaks seldom enough that when they do, it lands. That is not luck. That is a reputation built through restraint. Now, I want to address something directly, because there is a version of everything we've discussed that is not what I'm describing. There are people who are quiet in rooms because they're afraid, because they don't trust their voice, because they've been made to feel that what they have to say isn't worth saying, and so they shrink. They disappear into the background, not by choice, but by conditioning. That is not the quiet I'm talking about. That silence is a wound, and it deserves to be addressed differently, with compassion, not with tactics. The strategic silence we're talking about today comes from a completely different place. It comes from confidence, not fear. Here's the test. Ask yourself, when you stay quiet in a conversation, does it feel like restraint, or does it feel like relief? Restraint is power being held. Relief is power being surrendered. If you're using silence to avoid, that's understandable. But it won't give you the advantages we've talked about. Those only come when the silence is inhabited. When you are present inside it, watching, processing, deciding. The distinction matters because one is retreat and the other is readiness. Here's something concrete, something you can carry out of this today. For the next 24 hours, in every conversation you have, wait until the very end before you say what you were first tempted to say. Let the conversation move. Let the other person show you more than they would have if you'd come in early with your position. And then offer what you actually think. Notice how much more you know by the end than you did at the start. Notice how many things you were going to say at minute 1 that would have been wrong or unnecessary. Notice how the quality of what you say changes when it's been allowed to sit for a moment longer than feels comfortable. That discomfort, that is the thing worth training. Most people follow that pull every single time. They don't even notice it's happening. One day of resisting it will show you more about the way you communicate. Try it. See who you are on the other side of it. Mastering your voice in a crowded room is impossible if you haven't mastered your mind in a quiet one. Silence isn't the end of communication. It is the foundation of it, and the people who learn to inhabit it without flinching, they don't just become better at conversation, they become someone different, calmer, more deliberate, more trusted. If you haven't seen the guide on Marcus Aurelius's morning routine, watch that next, because what we talked about today lives in the mind first, and that's exactly where that guide begins. I'll meet you over there. Stay focused, stay calm,